Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. After 3 inconclusive elections and 18 months of political paralysis, Israel finally has a new government. Despite being rivals, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz are on the same page when it comes to one issue. Just days after forming a government, they announced the annexation of the occupied West Bank and Jordan Valley will go ahead. International condemnation has already poured in, with Israel's plans blasted as both illegal and a death blow to any future Palestinian state. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has referred to the announcement as Judgment Day, saying he'll cut all security cooperation with Israel. Turkey and several European countries have also criticized the move, warning that Israel's unilateral actions violate international law. Netanyahu, whose corruption trial just started, has repeatedly said that having Donald Trump in the White House presents a historic opportunity to redraw the map of the Middle East. But will his plan backfire and lead to further violence? Is a two-state solution all but dead and buried? And what does this mean for the future of the Palestinian Authority? Joining me now from Nazareth in Israel is Aida Touma Sliman, a member of the Knesset for the Joint List and Alliance of Arab Parties, and from London, Asa Winstanley, journalist at the electronic Intifada. So Aida, Asa, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Aida, let me begin with you. Tell us about the timing of the announcement of this annexation in terms of Israel's domestic politics. Why do you think Netanyahu is so insistent on this annexation since he secured his premiership? What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, Netanyahu understands very well that he has an open window now till the elections in the United States of America to implement his political plans of annexation. And he wants to use it, and he wants to be able to finish his job before anything goes back. On the other hand, we understand, and our estimation is that this government of Netanyahu is going to last no more than 1 year and a half, and then we are heading back to elections. So his time is also limited this wide. The third purpose that we are seeing also, he understands that the world is still under the crisis of COVID-19. So he wants to make the annexation as possible easy without a real resistance internationally, while the world is busy trying to deal with the corona crisis.
So you say he is exploiting the international preoccupation of COVID and make a unilateral action?
Yeah, well, he exploited that in order to create his government under the title of crisis. Of the crisis, he created a government. Why he doesn't, I believe he is also able to do it this way. We have to understand also that he kept the ultra radical right wing outside this government. The two of them, Israel Beitenu, Lieberman, and Yamina, Ayel Shaked and Bennett. So he needs also to emphasize that he can implement annexation and be radical as much as they are without having them in the government.
All right. So Asa, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has made previous threats to scrap all security agreements, ultimately not delivered upon. But his latest statement involves some of the toughest rhetoric. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think Mahmoud Abbas' rhetoric on this issue, as on most things, is entirely empty. Until the Palestinian Authority really recants on its promise of so-called security coordination with the Israeli occupation, all these threats are completely empty. Mahmoud Abbas has been making these kind of promises for years. He's been threatening to tear up the agreements with the Israeli occupation.
So what would take these threats to look real?
Well, for them to actually end what is essentially collaboration with the Israeli occupation, to stop Palestinian Authority security forces working with Israeli occupation troops to enforce the Israeli occupation. But what this would actually require is for the Palestinian Authority to dissolve itself, because the Palestinian Authority was established with the purposes of providing a native occupation agent for the Israelis.
But what happens if the Palestinian Authority dissolved itself? I mean, what would be the consequences? For example, where will this leave Hamas?
Well, I'm not sure where it would leave Hamas. Hamas would have to judge its own position on that issue. I mean, what we see now is completely unsupported, an incredibly unpopular so-called Palestinian Authority. I mean, I've written in the past in articles that the Palestinian Authority is it's kind of a contradiction in terms, because it has no real authority outside that which the Israelis designate to.
So, Aida, in your opinion, what's at stake this time for the Palestinians? What are the risks that will come along with this annexation if really executed?
If this annexation is executed, in my opinion, it's finishing the national liberation struggle of the Palestinians, as if it's closing the door for the option of creating a Palestinian state, and it has to then make the Palestinian people have to do a re-evaluation of how they are going to continue. I believe that the Palestinian people will never agree to a situation where they continue to be under the control of Israel without their rights of self-determination and their rights to live in dignity. My opinion is that even if you mentioned the rhetoric of Mahmoud Abbas, I think one of the decisions that should be made now is the threatening of canceling all the agreements is used as a tactic only to put pressure on Israel not to practice the annexation, or it is a strategy because the Palestinian leadership understand that the political situation is going to a new stage that was not created before and did not exist before, and that's why the Palestinian leadership has to reevaluate. If it is a strategy, it needs a lot of changes to happen, including that the Palestinian political decision should be moved back to the PLO and not to stay in the hands of the NA. And another decisions that should be taken later on.
All right. So, Asa, what's your take on the international reaction? Turkey said Turkey will not allow Israel to annex parts of West Bank, and that the Jerusalem it's red line. The European Union has called on a punitive economic sanctions if Israel pressed ahead with the plan. Can we say the EU is united against the plan, but divided over what to do? What's your take on that?
Well, I think the European Union's rhetoric is as empty as Mahmoud Abbas's. The European Union and European governments have, for decades, really made similar empty, weak noises against Israeli occupation while doing nothing to hold Israel to account. And in fact, worse than that, actually rewarding it through subsidies from the EU for technology research and development, which ends up going into the Israeli weapons industry, favorable trade agreements, and so on and so forth. The list goes on and on when it comes to European Union countries, especially countries like Britain, France, and Germany. And it's getting worse than that now, because the Israelis are pressuring and boasting of their successful pressure for the passing of new laws, such as has been done in the United States, and in France and Germany, and they're putting pressure on in the UK to more or less outlaw the boycott movement, the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, targeting Israeli war crimes. So until the EU and its member countries reverses its complicity and involvement with Israeli occupation, Israeli war crimes and Israeli apartheid, these empty rhetorics and empty words about sanctions and labeling of settlement produce, this mealy-mouthed stuff will mean nothing until they hold Israel to account in actuality.
All right. So, Aida, what do you make of the Arab world's reaction? Publicly, they condemn Israel, but maybe behind closed doors, they do the otherwise. And Jordan, which is one of only 2 Arab states to have signed peace treaty with Israel, blasted the plan, saying its execution could lead to the collapse of the Palestinian Authority and produce chaos and extremism in the region. So is this a security threat to Jordan, and how Jordan will manage to balance politics, diplomacy, as well as pragmatic concerns? And this is also valid for Egypt, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think there is a difference between the situation with Egypt and with Jordan. Jordan have a very clear, close border with Israel. Jordan is also, that's true that they signed the peace treaty, let's say, with Israel, but they understand also that this plan of annexation is preparing also for the alternative, what is called alternative homeland for the Palestinian, which means the Jordanian kingdom. And this is one of the fears, I think, that is existing in Jordan. That's why the Jordanians are more vocal against annexation than anybody else. Egypt is in a total different situation, in my opinion. For my regret, I do not count on any of the Arab regimes. We can see how they are opening doors for the normalization with Israel. They are having different levels of talks and meetings with the Israeli government, with the most dangerous Israeli government that existed till now. And I don't see how they are acting, how they are going to react. I have a real fear of the issue of annexation, and the world should understand that if it is not prevented at this point, we might end looking at a situation like the annexation of the Golan. We will have a more complicated situation later on.
I'm afraid we have to leave it here. Aida, Asa, thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. I appreciate it a lot. Turkey's lucrative tourism industry all but dried up when the coronavirus pandemic hit earlier this year. But now, as the busy summer season approaches, businesses are making tough decisions to save livelihoods while safeguarding public health. The global tourism industry, which makes up about 10% of the world's GDP, has come to a standstill as almost all flights were grounded and hotels closed to contain the outbreak. Tourism-dependent countries like Spain and Italy have been especially hard hit. But now, many are slowly trying to lure back visitors with promises of strict safety measures. Locals are already heading to the beach in Europe and the US, and the hospitality industry is hoping international travelers will soon follow. After being locked down for several weeks, Turkey is also starting to revive its $30 billion tourism sector. International patients seeking medical treatment are flying into Turkey, and restaurants, cafes, and beaches are reopening. Domestic flights are set to resume in June. But will new safety measures be enough to bring travelers back? And how are countries that have opened their tourism industries faring so far? And joining me from Istanbul is Emin Cakmak, the founding chairman of the Turkish Healthcare Travel Council. Also in Istanbul, we have Sinan Koseoglu, a multi-property general manager for JW Mariott and Sheraton here in Turkey. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Sinan, let me begin with you. Are Turkey's historic sites, beaches, and the most visited cities are safe to visit? In short, Are we opening up safely?
Yes, I can say that we are opening up safely because there is a huge the work behind, I can say, and the government took the millions of precautions and then acts. And besides this, there is the hotel associations and the hotel chains itself as well. They took the very serious the precautions and the actions. And therefore, I can say that we are getting ready, and then normally we are looking for the welcoming the guest as well. And the most important thing is that you can see the daily patients and plus the death percentages, which is very normally safe, and plus we can give the positive impact and the message to the world with that.
Okay.
That's the most important.
Yes, having mentioned the precautions, Emin, what is Turkey doing differently to get tourists interested in coming back? Tell us about the general measures taken so far.
Well, the most important action has been taken by the Ministry of Tourism and Culture. They have created a new criteria for new arrivals of tourists from abroad and from Turkey. There has been made this declaration so far 2 weeks ago, and all hoteliers and all hospitality services started preparing themselves according to the new instruction and new certification which been announced by Ministry of Tourism and Culture. We are one of the first country are taking this kind of action by the ministerial and government level and trying to apply all tourist destination that we can able to start up quickly as possible, because we are starting and opening our borders slowly according to our bilateral agreement with some countries. I believe that from 15th of June, we will be ready to receive some international tourists, but nevertheless, we already start the medical travelers.
Yes.
Since 2020 May.
Yes, I'm going to get into that later. But Sinan, let me go through the details for the hotels. As Emin just mentioned, the Tourism and Culture Ministry has just recently issued a hygiene notice to inform the hotels about the COVID-19. Could you tell us about the details? How are you planning to handle this process, which will, in terms of arrivals, be much slower than the previous seasons, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, this COVID is having an extraordinary impact on the hotel industry. It's that's clear that we will have the much reduced number of tourists, and traffic will be happening in Istanbul and Turkey, I can say, like the other part of the world as well. So therefore, for us, the most important thing is the first priority is the safety and well-being of all our guests, and same time the employees as well, and because that goes hand to hand together. So we move quickly to implement the necessary precautions, which is coming from the government ministry and plus our brand as well. So that's why we consider that now things are changing, and plus the expectation of the guest also is changing. So therefore what we implemented is basically to hospital level sanitization and cleaning, and plus we are giving basically this HACCP and food and beverage, the production areas, food control.
So wouldn't all these measures be more costly?
Well, it will be, yes. It will be costly, and for us, there will be more in terms of manning, in terms of the perishable items, or using the much more disinfectants and etc. So that's why there will be a more cost in the behind.
Okay. So Emin, Turkey also introduced criteria for health and hygiene for airlines, airports, and other transport. So how hard and different it would be for the tourism industry, which relies on airlines to function with social distancing restrictions now?
Well, according to Turkish Airlines chairman declaration and the general manager of Turkish Airlines declaration, I have follow up. They are bringing new rules and number of passenger in the aircrafts. Obviously, before it was an advantage to carry as much as possible, and big number and wide body flights mostly preferred by the airlines company to make more profit rather than flying with narrow body. But today's all wide body aircrafts going to be used for maybe 2/3 of their capacity, and to keep one empty seats in between three seats actually, to keep the distance.
Yes, but I also hear that testing centers were being set up at airports. So those guests who come without having been tested in the last 72 hours will be tested at the airports. What I wonder is how it would be possible to trace those people who tested positive, and how do you keep the track of them?
Well, I think, as you can see in my hand, it's mentioned that PCR tested and negative. So they're going to be kind of new installment, a new instrument and new tools people could purchase from the hospitals or from the institution, that they are already been tested by certification or by any digital document to prove that they are already tested and approved by negative result, or there will be a quick test in the airport who has no test before. They can be tested in the aircraft in a quick test, and they can have the measurement of the temperature, and they will check the symptoms.
All right.
And I'm sure there will be some security gates, and all will be done quickly and as quick as possible. Yeah, accordingly.
All right, Sinan, talk to us about foreign tourists' motivation for visiting Turkey. Do they tend to delay rather than canceling their early bookings? And how do you address tourists' concerns about the pandemic?
Well, the pandemic is a big question mark for everybody, because normally they want to feel safe naturally, and then let's start with the airlines and the question mark how they will fly and how they will land, and then how the hotels will take care. But there is the couple of polls I saw that that gives the mainly 50-50 currently the results. But I'm sure that once they will start to open up the places, which is I heard it today. Spain is opening up their basically to touristic areas for the arrivals.
Yes.
And then it follows Greece and etc. So that will give us, basically the lead that we will be the country that it will be the basically the choice for the tourists as well.
All right.
And I'm sure they will delay currently, because I'm receiving also for the hotels our clients. They said that, okay, can we move to our bookings from June to August? It means that at least 50% we have a hope.
Are thinking of visiting Turkey. So, Emin, where does Turkey stand when it comes to health tourism, and what does it offer in the midst of this pandemic?
Well, we were very lucky actually as a country, because we had our latest technology of hospitals and art of states. We were serving over 1 million patients from 165 countries previous years. And we were totally ready in terms of healthcare staffs, healthcare investments. And now the Turkish government and Turkish president has taken a quick decision to open up the borders to our neighbor, because we start receiving a lot of inquiries, and emergency cases need to be evacuated to Turkey to start their treatment, oncology, transplantology, and many heavy cases. So for this reason, we open up our gates 20 May to all world citizens, that they can come and treat it in our hospital, because we have enough capacity and enough capability to serve Turkish citizens plus international international patients. Due to our latest 5-6 years ago, we start investing our city hospitals.
All right, gentlemen, I'm afraid we're out of time, but it seems tourists will eventually flock back with masks, sanitizers, and maybe a bit of anxiety, but it seems that Turkey is opening up safely. Thank you very much for joining us. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Aisha Subarkash. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.